Good evening. It's 7 p.m. in the UK, and I am so lucky because I have the UK's top nutritionist with me right now, Richard Smith, as seen on TV. Hi, Rich.
Stephen, how are we doing, my man?
Well, I'm doing really good. We're both suffering with the heat because I'm sprinting at the moment, and you're doing lots of activity, I believe.
Yes, lots of activity. 10. What did we do today? It was the fully 10K race today, so I've been partaking in that this morning. So yeah, in this baking heat.
Wow. And how did you go? Did you get a personal best again?
No, I didn't try. And the reason being, I'm racing again in 2 weeks at Taunton, which is a 10K by a canal. So by default, my reckoning is that it must be fairly flat. Meaning that it's going to be a fast course. So I'm going to save any PB attempts for that. I've had a few PB attempts recently. And what you can't do, as you know, is push to the max every time that you run and you race, because you can't run at 100 miles an hour or 100% continuously. It's all about these training peaks. You work up to a PB and then it dips back down, and then you build them back up. But I've done 2 consecutive PBs week after week. In fact, they were 5 days apart. One was a 10K, one was a 5. Following that, I've noticed my legs are feeling a little bit worse for wear, so I need to rein it back in, recover. So the run today for me was a zone 3 run, a tempo run, nice and easy. I was pretty much the same time as I ran it last year, but I barely broke a sweat this year, whereas last year I was fighting for my life. So it was a nice easy training run in prep for Taunton in 2 weeks.
Excellent. Okay. So just to say what I normally say, if you put a question in and you don't hear it answered straight away, you don't need to retype it, because Rich and I try and give you full answers. So if you type it in now and we're not at your question by 7:15, then we've obviously had some other questions and some big answers. So we're going to dive straight in. Most people faff around much longer than us. We don't. We get straight in. So here we go. Phil Richardson. Hi, Richard. So this is for you, Richard.
Hello, Phil.
I have your product, Pure 8 MCT powder. I don't want to consume coffee. How else can I take your C8? If I mix with a little milk and drink, would that be okay? Need to be warm to dissolve. Thanks.
It doesn't need to be warm to dissolve. You can add it to cold water. It is a little bit more difficult. I add mine to the electrolytes. So if I'm not using it for coffee, for example, I'll add it to cold water, electrolytes in a glass or a shaker. You can just add to water. I wouldn't add with milk. The reason being is that the MCT, my C8 is the world's highest purity by certification. The C8 is 99.9%, which is the highest in the world and better than anybody else on the market, and that is a fact. And it's one of the less expensive as well. Anyway, it's a compound that I use. It's a fantastic compound which anybody can use. C8 is the most antimicrobial substance that is available without a doctor's prescription. It's an incredible compound for doing all of the things that a keto lifestyle or carnivore lifestyle will do. And it does this whether you're ketogenic or not, because of its ability to convert into ketones incredibly quickly. And we've touched base on this a few times recently, but its fat needs to go through carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1 and 2 in order to enter beta oxidation to create ATP. The ketones enter the mitochondria directly and are instantly converted into ketones, whether you were ketogenic or not. So all of those benefits come from that. Now, the reason I wouldn't co-consume it with the milk is that this is going to dampen its effect in regards to ketone production only slightly. A lot of people will use it in their coffee and they'll add cream, but you're going to confer more benefit that it is. We've got to get it in, haven't we? We've got to get it in. We confer the benefit. You can use it this way and it's still going to confer that benefit, but the benefit is going to be incredibly higher. It's going to be much more higher if you take out the double cream, and so with the milk. It does act as a cream. I mean, you can add to tea, but again, if you were strict carnivore and you're not consuming coffee or tea, you could add to water or the electrolytes. And now, obviously, we've got the unflavored, which if you are a strict carnivore, you could add to that potentially. You could add it to water. I'm just trying to think outside the box now. If you weren't consuming electrolytes, I mean, you could add glycine or citrulline malate potentially. But I mean, if you are carnivore elite and taste doesn't bother you, then just mix it with water. But I would say to confer that max benefit, consume it without the milk. But of course, you can consume it with wherever you like, but the benefit is going to be greater if you remove the milk when consuming.
Do you have to dilute it then, Rich? Can you have it straight?
The powder, I've never tried.
Sorry, I was thinking the oil there.
The oil you can. So I think the question was the powder. Was it the MCT powder? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was. Yes, sorry. Yes.
I've never tried dry scooping.
No, don't do that.
It's again, the oil is another option. If you didn't want to add it to anything, you can take the MCT from the spoon. Now the MCT is, I wouldn't say is MCT is MCT, but the powder is bound to acacia fiber. That's what makes it into a powder. So to reach the same benefit, you'd need to consume a little bit more. You'd need to consume around, and this is off the top of my head, around 20 grams of the MCT powder to get the benefit of a 14 mil serving of the oil. And I may be wrong with that, but it's something similar to this. So if you do not want to add it to anything, as you rightly say, Steve, you could just spoon it, or what I quite often pour it into my mouth. But if you are new to MCT oil, don't overdo this because it can cause gastro distress in the early days, and this is why a lot of people suffer with these issues because of the fat and the processes that are going on within the body in regards to the bile and upping that consumption of fat. But this can still happen if you are even adapted because of its ability to go through the body that quickly. But
yeah,
fantastic
brilliant
product.
Yeah. Too much too soon sometimes, is one of those things. Now, this is a two-parter, so pay attention, Rich, because I think you're mentioned in the second part. This is Gemma. Thanks for the question, Gemma. By the way, if you want to jump the queue, you can do the super chat. Gemma, Ryan, I have been experiencing bloating over the past week or so, despite this initially subsiding when I first started the diet. Could this possibly be due to not eating enough? That is a possibility. Also been having quite intense sugar cravings recently. Could this be due to the sweeteners in the electrolytes? For reference, I've been keto carnivore for about 45 days. I will add my 2 penneth, because normally when people are experiencing cravings and also saying that they feel they're bloated, that can actually be a sign of not eating enough, because when you're not eating enough, what does your body do? It pushes you to go and eat something. So we don't know you well enough, Gemma. Maybe you can join our school community and get a bit more involved. But 45 days in, under eating, I think, might trigger the cravings. There's other reasons. There's emotional reasons for eating. Richard and I disagree slightly on the sweetness. I think for some people, it can make you want more sweet stuff.
I agree.
I'm not saying, yeah, good. That's good. And for other people, it's absolutely totally fine. But that's why Rich listened to the feedback and has got the unsweetened electrolytes as well. So you've got that option now. The reason I'm answering is because Rich likes to not come across like he's selling stuff. I'm not selling his electrolytes. I'm selling you an option. If you need the electrolytes and you're worried about the sweetness in it, well, now we have an unsweetened version as well. I earn nothing from saying that whatsoever. Going back to the bloating, if you're only 45 days in, yes, Rich just sort of briefly mentioned it might be down to the fact that your bile production has not caught up with the amount of fat you're eating. It could be when you're eating. Some people have that initial honeymoon period, which you did, and then their body is not able to catch up with the bile production or the stomach acid production. So some people, I recommend when they have a bit of bloating, is to have one more meal, but the same volume of food. So if you're eating 2 meals a day, let's just say, and you're having 4 ribeyes, just to make life easy. You have your 4 ribeyes divided by 3. So that's one of the things you could look at. But have you got anything to say, Rich?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I completely agree with what you say about sweeteners. Sweeteners can cause a septic response, and they can cause sugar cravings. With the electrolytes, the amount of stevia that are in the flavored is minuscule. There's hardly any stevia in there. What is in there that's actually giving it the sweet taste is the vitamin C. Now, vitamin C can also cause cravings. So yes, it is possible. It's also, and more likely, I would say that it's a case of going through that adaptation process, and the body is just craving, the drug that you've just come off, which the cravings can last for an awful long time. The bloating, I would put down to, it could very well be everything that you just mentioned, but the body's going through a change. Your body has been in the metabolic state of glycolysis for your entire life. So your gut microbiome has been geared up to processing sugar or glucose, carbohydrate. Now you've cut carbohydrate out of the diet or massively reduced. Now you're feeding it lots of fat. So initially the bloating's going away because we're now restricting the toxic compounds, the phytoalexins from the vegetables, the fiber, which all cause bloating issues. So the stomach's gone down in the initial phase, but now your gut microbiome is dying off, causing bloating and maybe gas and even sort of maybe, it could be diarrhea or even constipation, but certainly bloating. It takes time for the gut microbes to adapt. So that there's two predominant phylum within the gut, the Bacteroidetes and the Firmicutes. And they need to sway more towards the Bacteroidetes, which is the predominator in regards to protein and fat metabolism, I think, from memory. But it is a transition. Look, stick with it. If you think the electrolytes are causing a problem, take them out for a day or two and see if it makes a difference. Then put it back in and see if that helps. If it does, fantastic. If you're still suffering with these lack of salts, if you're suffering with issues through lack of electrolytes, then as Stephen says, the unflavored version is available. But I warn you with this that it contains astaxanthin. Now, astaxanthin is a compound that comes from, I don't know if you can see it in there, but it's, that's gone paler now because I've had it open for a little while. But it can be this incredibly bright orange or red color, which I don't know if I can tip that so you can see that in there. So this is the unflavored. It looks like it's full of chemicals and all sorts of flavorings. There's no flavoring in there at all. This is the color of astaxanthin, which is what gives salmon its distinctive color, and flamingos and so on and so forth. It's the world's most potent antioxidant. And it's a true antioxidant, by the way. And I won't get too deep into that now, but it does carry a seaside taste, if you like, or a fishy taste, along with the electrolytes, which are salts, by the way. So I've had lots of negative feedback in regards to the taste because I've branded it as an unflavored. Everything tastes of something. And this taste, the taste that you can taste with this is the astaxanthin. By unflavored, I mean it's unsweetened. There's no sweeteners or vitamin C in there. There's no plant compounds. This has been designed for a stricter person living a strict ketogenic lifestyle, or more predominantly a carnivore lifestyle. If you don't like things that taste like salt water or seawater, then this product is not for you. This is for the elite. I enjoy it, and many others within the community have come back and said the same. But if you're expecting it not to taste of anything, then you're going to be incredibly disappointed. It's if you don't like, as I say, seawater, when you go for a swim on the beach, then this product is not for you. But it is another option. And if you are suffering with an electrolyte imbalance, then you need to be salting the meals, particularly with a Celtic sea salt or pink Himalayan, preferably the Celtic. But you also need to be looking at consuming maybe organ meats, the stringy bits on the beef, and the bits the connective tissue on the bones, the knuckles on the end of the joints of chicken and things. This is where the collagen and the electrolytes are stored within these animal proteins. And you can obtain enough through diet alone, but very few of us chew, the cartilage on the end of a chicken bone, which is exactly what I was doing today, by the way. We all went for food after this 10K run, and I was, chomping on my knuckles of the chicken and getting all the connective tissue off. This is where the electrolytes are. But you can do it naturally, and this is how you do it naturally. Obviously, bone broth is another alternative. You can make your own, or you can buy it. But electrolytes are incredibly important. We need these salts. Electrolytes are these electrically charged minerals that allow the body to do much of its work, and we can't live without them. So we need electrolytes from one source or another, whether it's natural or supplementation.
Yeah, that's great, Rich. One thing I'm going to add, because again, I'm partisan, I'm not part of this. I don't think it tastes as salty as Rich is saying personally. But I know why you're saying it, because you don't want bad reviews from people who get it and think it is too salty. But man up, everybody. Oh, I'm not allowed to say that. That's politically incorrect. Person up. Right. So here we go. Right. I am 60. I'm allowed to say these things. You can grandfather me in on these terrible phrases. Stefan, he's asking, have you ever heard of structured or EZ water, or EZ water, how people pronounce it, which stands for exclusion zone, fourth grade water? I think you mean full phase water. If yes, do you believe in it? Is it woo-woo in your eyes? Which is a great question. Now, yes, there's very convincing videos about this. You can have two sort of beakers full of water, and you can make them form a bridge. We don't know why that happens. There is also quite a good footage of anything that's hydrophilic, that a substance, and you've got the water there and you see the salts going away. A lot of the effects of EZ or EZ structured water can be attributed to salts. I'm not saying it's woo-woo, and I'm not saying I believe it. I'm actually looking at this left, right, and center because I think it's really fascinating. But there is a lot to it. When you talk about what is an acid, the dissociation of molecules in water is what causes something to be an acid. When you look at water, you have basically, this is what I was just popped off to get. You have two hydrogens and an oxygen. And this doesn't really tell the whole picture. So what you get is electrons going around, obviously the nucleus, and hydrogen likes to make its outer shell have more than one electron, which is why it joins to oxygen. And you get those two hydrogens joining that oxygen molecule. And sometimes, because you've got these electrons and then they go over and they join, what might happen, and what does happen, is one of the electrons is closer to the nucleus, which has got a proton. So you can get hydronium atoms, and you can get hydroxine, and you can get one of them having 3 electrons, one having 1. So water is magnificent. The reason we talk about the fourth phase is you've got water as a liquid, you've got it as a vapor, and you've got it as an ice. Now, it's very different to any other substance, because when water turns to ice, it floats. If it didn't, we wouldn't be on this planet, because basically the whole seabed would be ice, and then you just have sea. And water is amazing. So yes. Do I think it's woo-woo? I don't think it's woo-woo. I think there's definitely something to look into. The jury's out. I am researching it right now. Now, the inventor of the MRI believes in it very much. So he's not an idiot, but he also sells it. So I think I have a client who's been on hydrogen water, say, for instance, for many, many years, and absolutely swears by it, makes him feel really good. So I'm not going to say easy water doesn't exist, or it does or doesn't exist. I think a lot of the science is out there, but it's not conclusive, and there are other mechanisms that can explain what people think is unique to the exclusion zone water. So I don't think it's woo-woo, and I think we need to get away from that phrase. I know you're just using it with very tongue-in-cheek, but many things that sound like that have a good base in science. For instance, grounding. I'm actually standing on a grounding sheet right now. We are supposed to be barefoot. We're supposed to be in contact with the earth. Yeah, to some people that might sound like sort of flower power, hippie, but it isn't. It's common sense. Because if you look at the reverse, should babies be wrapped up with shoes on and disconnected from the earth? Does that sound good? That sounds a bit weird to me. Not having your child running across the grass, but actually completely clothed and locked away from it, and not looking at the sun, and not being out in the fresh air. and not putting your feet in the sea. All of that sounds really weird to me personally, much weirder than somebody saying you should be out with your feet touching the earth, you should be paddling, enjoying nature and all that. So anyway, that's my 2 pence. I don't know what Rich has to say about that.
I think you've covered everything there, Steve. Fantastic.
All right, thank you. I'm glad you said that, because the next one is really up your street, and that is from Michael. Quick Mtor question, if I may. Of course, I absolutely love talking about Mtor, or listening to Rich talk about Mtor, because he's the only one that does actually talk about it properly. I think people like Bart Kane, obviously Jonathan does as well. But let's have a look. 1, can I have coffee and cream without extending or activating Mtor? 2, is there any benefit from taking 3.5 grams of leucine at bedtime, 4 hours after dinner, to trigger Mtor? So, Rich, let's give everyone a sort of broad, what is Mtor in the first place? Why is Michael talking about leucine? And where's this 4-hour thing coming from?
Perfect. So our bodies, when we look at fasting, we fast for autophagy. And in order to do that, we need an elevated level of something called AMPK. And opposite to the end of that is something called Mtor. We need both. And it's we're commonly told that, you can activate one or the other. And in one sense, that's true. But in another, it isn't. The reason being is both are always activated. So both, but one will predominate. And when one predominates, it switches the other off. Now, when we are in a fasted state, this sort of switches or down regulates Mtor, if you like. Mtor is what allows us to grow and build muscle and everything within the body. We can activate Mtor through IGF-1, or we can activate it directly. And there's a number of things that will activate Mtor. Carbohydrate will activate Mtor, but it will do so through IGF-1. Training, stress, i.e. training, will also activate Mtor. Eating protein will also activate Mtor. Now, training and protein via leucine, the amino acid leucine, will activate Mtor directly. So if we are training in the gym and we want to grow our muscle in particular, then we need Mtor activations. So leucine is the amino acid found in animal proteins that is going to elicit this response. And if we look at the amount of leucine required in order to do this, it's a minimum of 1.5 grams or 1,500 milligrams. And this is why, Michael's put on the 3.5 there, because the optimal top end of the range is sort of 3 grams, possibly 3.5. But we need at least 1.5 in order to do this. Consuming that from animal proteins, we would need between 40 to 50 grams, roughly, depending on the source, of animal proteins in weight. If we're looking at eggs, we need around 6 eggs to maximize that Mtor activation. So basically what we're doing is when we're training, we're activating Mtor, we're giving the body a signal to grow. But we don't want to stay in this constant elevated activation of Mtor, because we also need AMPK. And this is where a lot of bodybuilders will go wrong. And bodybuilders are notorious for dying considerably younger. In America, I think the last time I looked, it was an average of 12 years shorter lifespan than the average American. And many would blame anabolic steroids. I'd blame excess carbohydrate consumption and this continuous activation of Mtor. I think there's an argument against the anabolics in regards to that, but that's probably a talk for another day. But we don't want this constant activated state of Mtor, particularly through IGF-1. We need IGF-1, but we don't want to overstimulate IGF-1. IGF-1 stimulation is directly linked to cancers and tumors. So this is why training is a fantastic way to activate Mtor, and consuming meat is a fantastic way to activate Mtor. We can do this. We can bounce off something called the Mtor reset. So we can stimulate during lifting weights, and we'll spike Mtor. We'll ride the Mtor activation, and then it resets. And then the best thing we can do in order to build muscle is activate it again, but not in a continuous state. So every time we reactivate, we get this stimulus again. And this is how we maximize muscle growth. 3.5 grams of leucine at bedtime, 4 hours after, would be enough for another Mtor activation. What I would say is I would consume some protein with it, because the leucine almost acts as an agent in order to upregulate the body's ability to absorb the other amino acids found within the protein. So, even if it's something small, I would take the leucine and eat. And you can even do this throughout the day. You can take leucine while or just before eating the protein to further maximize that that progression. Can I have coffee and cream without extending or activating mTOR? I believe so. I mean, I don't know. I can't think off the top of my head why coffee or cream. I mean, cream's full of fat. We're not going to get the protein in there. So I would assume so. I mean, if we are in a fasted state, we quite often consume coffee and cream. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything out in regards to a cortisol or adrenaline activation, but I don't think I am. I mean, we consume, the fat coffees, isn't it? While we're still maintaining a state of autophagy through fasting. So yeah, a coffee and cream is fine. You can further exacerbate or benefit from that state with, as I say, the C8 oils or powders, coconut oil. But there's nothing wrong with cream. I've had tons of cream today. I've had like 3 servings of cream in my coffee today after my 10K race. So coffee and cream is fine. Yes, leucine at bedtime will activate, but I would consume some protein with it. You're already breaking, that AMPK or the fasted state. So, what's a little bit of cheese or a couple of mouthfuls of beef before bed, which works incredibly well for me. But yes, is the answer to no to the first and yes to the second, if I've got that right.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Just for those people that are interested in the easy water and light and everything, on Tuesday at 7 p.m, Team GB, Carnivore Team GB, we're actually talking about all that stuff. So if you really like it and you're interested in that, do tune in. Right, because we could definitely have a whole hour on that subject. Gaza is asking, is tallow the same as beef dripping? Can you spread dripping on your face for moisturizing? You're cheap. No, because although they're both from beef, I mean, dripping, there's a clue in the name there. At room temperature, tallow is hard and beef dripping is not so hard. So yes, I would say you're going to have to look at tallow products for your face. I would go for the proper tallow, which comes from the suet, from the fat around the organs of the animal. But I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that, Rich.
I'm a big fan of beef dripping for a number of uses. Would I rub it in my face directly? Probably not, but I do use tallow products. I know you've got a brand that you prefer. I've got a brand that I prefer. Well, we can tell people what they are if you like. I mean, the one I use, oh my goodness, I've taken it home. I'll have to take a look at my phone to find out what the brand is called again. But it's just left me.
Is it Rachel's?
Yes, it is Rachel Ashby's.
Yeah, the Carnivore Fitness, which is a great brand. I use the Fat Cow one because I use it. Before I met Rachel, I was using Fat Cow, and there's a link in my description on my channel. But I'm more than happy if you're on Richard's channel. I mean, the thing is, tallow is better than all the chemical stuff. I'm just happy if people are using proper things for their face, for their hair, for whatever you want to use it for. This way of eating, by the way, your skin is made from the inside out anyway. So if you're thinking, well, I'm not going to go carnivore, but I'll stick some tallow on my face, then that's not really going to cut it. It's better to get your diet and your fluid balance correct. Get out in the sunlight, get some fresh air. And the tallow is like the sort of butter on the steak, really. But yeah, so yeah. Carry on, Rich. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. I used to suffer with severe skin conditions. I'd suffer with acne and severe boils all over my face and all over my back. Since living this way, they've all cleared up. I get the odd spot now and again, but they're incredibly few and far between. And you're right, the body heals from inside out. And the reason that we quite often get this, yes, you can get it from training and like, I go riding for 6 hours at a time and sweating and all this sort of stuff. But, but the body does cleanse from the inside out. And if you are suffering with skin conditions, severe acne, spots, psoriasis, eczema, this is a sign of intestinal permeability. And what you find is once you heal the gut, once you stop consuming the compounds that are causing the release of that molecule zonulin and causing that gap to appear in the tight junction between the epithelial cells, the gut heals. And, I'll name a couple of the contributing factors to this for the guys that don't know, but wheat germ agglutinin, gluten gets a bad rap, but all bread compounds contain wheat germ agglutinin. Phytohemagglutinin also, which is found in vegetables. Casein can also be a contributing factor. Alcohol, medication, that sort of stuff. But the biggest contributing factor is wheat germ agglutinin. Once we come away from eating those toxic compounds, the gut heals, and all of these things clear up, and the skin conditions. I do use tallow products. I use it on my lips. I use it on my skin, and I find they work incredibly well for me. But yeah, that's where I am with the tallow products.
And it's Tallow Glow is Richard's one.
Yes,
just for
on.
fairness, I'll put that in the chat. Right. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that it's nice that people are trying it, and I've used it for a long period of time. So there you go. Let's have a look. You see, there's a lot for Rich tonight. Adam Smith, are there any long-term negatives to the use of exogenous ketones, i.e. downregulation of any processes that can hinder or lower base ketones from strict carnivore diet if overused? You guys are the best. Thank you very much. And that's a nice one to get just as we've hit 100 viewers, which is fabulous. Again, I'm gonna let Rich go because he is the electrolyte expert
and exogenous ketones. All it
Adam, and you use them, yes.
Adam, thanks for that. Way too kind. Just as well, we love what we do, isn't it? We love coming live and seeing all you guys comment and join in. So thank you so much. Look, there's negatives to everything. If we overconsume water, we drown. So even in the simplest form, we can overconsume everything. This is what I've got in there. So I've got exogenous ketones in there. That is the first, second, third time that I've used exogenous ketones today. I've used an incredibly low dose comparative to what many would use. And I use it for a number of reasons. But yes, I believe that you can overdo these things. If you are constantly flooding your body with an exogenous source, and exogenous means something from outside the body, endogenous is something from within inside the body. When you become ketogenic and carnivore, we endogenously create these ketones. Initially as acetone and acetoacetate, and as we gravitate deeper down that conversion of adaptation, it's beta-hydroxybutyrate. Beta-hydroxybutyrate is what I have there. Supplementing with BHB can stimulate specific enzymes and pathways within the body to allow these adaptation processes to occur quicker. And again, I've mentioned this a number of times, the monocarboxylate transporters and specific enzymes like BDH, ACAT, and SCOT are all upregulated through using exogenous ketones, as they will be with coconut oil and C8 caprylic acid or MCT oil. It's just at a lower level. The reasons I use them is that they breach the blood-brain barrier. It gives you this instant mental clarity and energy that you didn't have. I was exhausted before coming on this. I'm still not feeling absolutely brilliant after a long day, early start, running a race in the baking heat, being busy all day. And it just allows me to fire up my brain and continue to do this every week. I work 7 days a week. I could not do this living on carbs for a start, and living a ketogenic carnivore lifestyle allows me to do this because the ketones will breach the blood-brain barrier when glucose can't. So they supply this superior energy, but they also supply superior energy to the heart and the body. They'll increase mechanical efficiency of the heart by as much as 35% and blood flow by as much as 70%. They help block NLRP3 inflammasome, which is what's responsible for the inflammatory signaling within the body. So there's lots of benefits to living the lifestyle. I further enhance that by taking, the BHB from an exogenous source, and I'm a big fan. But yes, if you overconsume, so if you were to constantly take exogenous ketones throughout the day, I believe that it will downregulate the body's ability to create ketones endogenously. I think these should be used sparingly, and by sparingly I mean 1 to 3 times a day, depending on requirement. But we don't want to be consuming these constantly. Lots and lots of benefits to exogenous ketones. But yes, for sure, if you are going to overconsume, the body no longer needs to make ketones. So it will downregulate the body's ability to do so. And it's a requirement, which means you can actually gain weight. So I take the exogenous ketones to help me to further fat burn on occasions, when I was competing and bodybuilding. But the opposite is also true. If you overconsume, and the same we can look at fat. When we consume fat on a ketogenic or carnivore lifestyle, we're told fat is your new best friend, and it is. Fat and protein are the two most important compounds for us to consume on the planet. We don't need any carbohydrate. Our bodies make glucose, so we don't need any exogenous glucose. The body makes all of the glucose that we need. But every cell in our body is made of protein. Every cell in the body is made of fat. We are in a society in which we are told to avoid consuming fats, and that is wrong. We need to be in the society that encourages fat consumption, particularly saturated fats. That said, you can overconsume saturated fats, not because it's going to lead to cardiovascular disease, but because it will cause weight gain eventually. It's incredibly hard to gain weight living carnivore. I consume well over 1 kilogram of meat per day. My caloric value is anywhere between 4,000 to 6,000 on a daily basis, and I'm still single-figure body fat, but I can gain weight if I overconsume on that. But you certainly don't want to fear fat. And it's the same with the exogenous ketones. They can confer the benefit, but overconsumption is going to downregulate.
Brilliant answer, Rich. Absolutely brilliant. Right, we're going to go to the next question. Rich is from Herbert. Good old Herbert, another fine supporter. We'll try to make a hand cream, but recipe includes coconut oil in addition to tallow and virgin honey wax. Is that okay? What about adding a few drops of essential oils? Thanks. I mean, the thing is, we're going back to plants. Now, plants are, yes, historically, especially herbs, sort of the root of some medicinal things, but also if you keep in contact with what's happening in the plant world, for instance, volatile organic compounds, or VOXs as they're called, there's been a brilliant study where they're able to let you visualize, actually see communication of plants. Now, why are we anti-plants? Because of these sort of things. One of the most amazing things about biology and the people studying biology is they're not talking about this from an aspect of diet. So they do proper studies because they want to know how the plants are functioning. Strangely enough, all this rubbish monocropping and agriculture being taken over by people we don't particularly like has got some research that could benefit the carnivore diet. So, for instance, if you look at, there's one particular plant that when it's attacked by caterpillars, it produces this volatile organic compound, which is incidentally what they're now thinking, like the smell of mint is and all this sort of stuff. It's a warning. It just ramps up a bit. What I thought was completely brilliantly done in this experiment was they realized that these caterpillars that are eating the plant, they stress the plant, so they release some of this volatile organic compound that the plant can produce. And once that caterpillar has it in its system, that signals that there's a caterpillar in the vicinity to some birds. And they've actually studied this. And the caterpillars that have attacked a plant are attacked by birds a lot more than those that aren't. So they are communicating. So I think when you talk about essential oils and talk about any plant material, I'm still very much, well, we don't really know about all the compounds in plants. If we can stick with animal products, that's going to be better. But Herbert, I think you're great. You know what you're doing. If you feel that's going to work for you, and it does, more power to your elbow. But I think the more pure you can make it, the more towards tallow it is rather than anything else. I personally think the better. Rich?
Yeah, look, I agree. Plants contain lots of toxins, phytoalexins, poisons, if you like. And they are poisons. We've discussed this many times in the past in regards to flax seeds that contain linamarin, which is a cyanogenic glycoside, which breaks down into hydrocyanic acid or cyanide. 200 grams of flaxseed is enough to kill an adult human being. So these compounds, do contain toxins. That said, these toxins have been shown to make medications. They do have medicinal purposes, and I think Steve would agree that we're not against. I'm not against plant compounds for.
No,
perfect,
we're not.
Brilliant.
No.
There we go. So I'm not against, or we're not against plant compounds for medicinal purposes. If you have an issue and you have a medication that is going to heal, that issue or address that issue, then that's fine. There's a place for medication. What I don't like is the addition of medication if you don't have a problem. And I always come back to broccoli when I talk about this, because, we're told that broccoli is a fantastic compound to consume because it contains a compound called sulforaphane. Sulforaphane has been shown to fight cancers. Brilliant. Let's all eat broccoli. Sulforaphane is a compound used in the treatment of cancers because it has the ability to kill cancer cells. It's a chemotherapy treatment. You wouldn't take chemotherapy if you didn't have cancer, because chemotherapy kills every cell in the body, not just the cancer cells. So, if you are sick and you're not living a ketogenic carnivore lifestyle, which would be my advice, if you were a sufferer of that, and I need to be careful what we say because we are on YouTube, then that would be my advice. But if you are going to continue to eat plants, then sulforaphane is a compound which you could consume in order to do that. It does confer a benefit in regards to that, but you wouldn't take the chemotherapy pill if you didn't have cancer. If you didn't have depression, you wouldn't take an antidepressant. If you didn't have inflammation, you wouldn't take an anti-inflammatory. Take them in the short term to address the issue. But once that issue has been resolved, you need to look at what's caused that issue in the first place. And quite often or not, it's more to do with our diet, our lifestyle, or environmental impacts. And we can change these and reduce the amount of times they happen. So things like honey and these other compounds, I think there's a place for them if you are suffering with an issue that can address. But once that has passed, then, I'm not a fan of using those compounds.
Cool. That's great. Thank you for the question. Thanks everybody for the question. We're trying to keep on top of them, but also give you a proper answer. Good evening, gents. Have you heard of any positive effects from carnivore keto regarding restless legs syndrome? Thank you. For me, a little bit of balance. Yes, I've heard of many positive effects, but I've also heard some people get restless leg syndrome initially, and it can be a little time before that's all sorted. Many different remedies. There's lots of different electrolyte drinks out there. There's lots of different advice. But in the end, most people I know that have this, even if they've had it for years or they've started to get it, they tend to have resolution with this way of eating. But then what happens is they tend to be better in all other aspects as well. So that's my experience. Rich?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, plain and simple. Living this lifestyle seems to address almost every issue that I've ever come across personally and with the clients and customers that I deal with. To put that into perspective, I in my mid to late 20s, I could barely walk up the stairs without stopping or being severely out of breath. I was type 2 diabetic, clinically obese, suffered with depression, anxiety, arthritic pains, severe skin conditions, these daily debilitating migraines that would make me blind. I had all sorts of problems, and all of which have been resolved, from living the lifestyle. I still suffer with migraines, but they are now very few and far between. And now when they are triggered, it's to do with lack of sleep or stress, which come hand in hand when you're self-employed, unfortunately. But I no longer take any medication, and I was on a myriad of medication. Every issue that I've ever had, since has been resolved with the continuation of the diet and lifestyle. And I've seen clients and customers who have also seen, as you said, Stephen, a reversal of restless legs. Do you know what's really disconcerting sometimes is, and I know you have had clients like this also, I've had clients who have come to me who have said, all of these issues that I've had have gone away, except there's one thing, and then they've gone back to eating the way that they were prior, just because that one thing wasn't resolved. And then all of these other things have come back. But that was their excuse that they needed just to go back to eating sugar, which is a drug, and it's more addictive. I need to be careful with this because people always shout at me. It's been shown to be more addictive than cocaine, and it's arguably as addictive as heroin. And it depends which study you look at in regards to that. But it is highly addictive. It blocks the prefrontal cortex, inhibiting our ability to make sensible decisions. Basically, we'll do silly things to go for sugar. And this is why many people sort of fall off the wagon. But the complete resolution, if not a complete resolution, there's significant improvements in all aspects. And I'm talking everything. I don't want to name specific things on this channel because we seem to get hindered in our progress in regards to who can see our content, maybe we can touch base on this on the other channel when we move over now at 8 p.m. But yes, is the short answer. I believe you would see an improvement.
Yeah. Now, Landers is saying the only advantage I experienced with the Keto Pro Electrolytes was it stopped me from white knuckling to my next meal, took the stress out of the carnivore journey. Well, that's a big plus, isn't it, really? Right. Let's have a look at the next thing. Heidi, grass-fed beef sometimes has a fishy taste. Could it be omega-3 or the compound you're speaking of?
Omega-3, quite possibly. Yes. Yeah. Fat in general, but yes. If you are looking for omega-3, you could, and you don't want to eat fish. I mean, a lot of people within the carnivore community, Sarah, that you know, Stephen, that I've worked with, the neurophysiologist, she suffers with severe reactions to fish. So therefore, she struggles to get omega-3s through fish compounds, which is a common thing along the carnivore journey. Many people live in a carnivore lifestyle experience issues in regards to, we've removed the plants and we can still suffer with other issues. Some people suffer with issues with coffee, the compound being acrylamide there, and then other people can suffer with issues with chicken, some with pork, shellfish, fish in general, eggs. So sometimes it isn't just enough to live a strict carnivore lifestyle. Many seem to need to gravitate deeper into beef and lamb. Which a good friend of mine, Sylvie from the Real Food Company, told me recently. Lamb is considerably higher in omega-3s than beef. It's around 10 times higher. So if you can't consume your omega-3s from fish, then opt for lamb. And I would also argue that lamb is potentially better based on the amino profile and other vitamin and mineral content within there. Lamb is always grass-fed, and even if you buy grass-fed beef, on occasions, it may not always be grass finished. It is in the UK. It is. It's always grass fed because they're in the fields. The only time that it isn't grass finished is if the fields are scarce because of winter, freezing, snow, etc. And they may be grain finished. Because that food isn't available. I know the States is slightly different, but lamb is always grass fed. If you can get mutton, which is incredibly difficult to find, but that is going to be even more nutrient dense because that meat has had time to mature. So yes, I believe it could be the fishy sort of taste or smell from the omega-3s. The astaxanthin won't exist in the beef, so it wouldn't be the astaxanthin. But yeah, I guess the omega-3s could very well be.
Yeah, I think so too. Just so you know, I now have my meal plan and also cookbook available as a paperback on Amazon. And the reason that triggered my memory is because I have the nutrient of every single meal in there, and lamb always comes up really good with all the nutrient profile. Right. I'm not saying the names because I just want to get straight to the questions. I have dysbiosis and leaky gut with diverticulitis. I started carnivore and feel great, but constipation is so a problem, even though I'm loading up with fat. Thoughts there, right? Okay. Well, there's some healing going on. Obviously, if you have these problems, if you're loading up with fat and you've still got constipation, then loading up with fat is possibly not the answer because you have to look at what other inputs are happening. So if your bile production is not great, or your stomach acid production is not great, or your mechanical digestion is not where it should be, then you could be causing problems at the front end. So I would always get that in order first. So chewing slower, which is one of the things always makes me laugh because it sounds like your grandparents talking to you at the table. But chewing your food, eating slower is really good because that just helps your digestion. Now, I know that's difficult. There was actually a fork that was invented that had a little light on it. So you'd use the fork and put that bit of food in your mouth, then you'd have to put it on the table and you couldn't use it until the light went out again. So it's a thing, it's a thing that people have problems with. So that would be the first thing. Secondly, it could be the amount of times you're eating. So if you're eating twice a day, maybe try eating 3 times a day, same volume of food, but just divided by 3 rather than 2, and let your bile production catch up. You let your stomach acid production catch up. That could help. Then I'm going to hand over to Rich because there's other things that can help with constipation, which are?
Yes, for sure. And I think you've hit the nail on the head with most of those there, Steve. There's an adaptation process going on. Quite often we go through a process of diarrhea, and this is to do with the fat overload and the bile production. The body isn't used to producing this much bile. It's meant to be reabsorbed in the small intestine, and it travels down to the colon where it leads to toilet problems. And then we sort of do, and I think one of our regulars within the school group is currently going through, and it's a common thing. So you go through this process of diarrhea, and then it transitions into constipation. And as you say, Steve, if this person isn't using, already consuming the fat and not, it hasn't alleviated the problem. I don't think it's a fat issue. It could be a protein issue in regards to digestion. The addition of zinc can help. So if you were to supplement in the short term with zinc, this can increase the acidity and help with the digestion of the protein. You could look at things like serrapeptase, enzymes and things that will help digest the proteins. But it is a transition phase. Again, we're going through this situation in regards to the whole gut microbiome, going through this transition. It will pass, so stick with it. I mean, look at the first part of the sentence. I've started carnivore and I feel great. So that's a box ticked. Dysbiosis, leaky gut, diverticulitis, these are all caused by plant compounds. I'm not saying never consume a plant compound again, but don't consume plants thinking that they are healthy for you, because they are not. There's nothing of any nutritional value in a plant or fruit, from that matter, that you cannot find in animal proteins in far higher quantities and way more bioavailable. If you are lucky enough to get away with consuming plant compounds, then fantastic. If you enjoy them but don't feel the need to consume them, diverticulitis in particular is a fiber issue. We don't need fiber in the diet, and maybe we can get into this a little bit later on if we have more time, but I can see the clock is ticking. Again, the fiber in the diet is a massive myth, and maybe we can get into this on the next channel, Steve. But keep doing what you're doing. The gut, it is going to adjust. The gut microbiome is going to adjust. Try the zinc, try maybe that serrapeptase, but stick with it. Focus on the positives. Don't look at the negative side of things, because these things will pass.
Excellent. Mojo Curio started taking electrolytes to help with oxalates. Will extra potassium and magnesium citrate cause any harm if I don't actually require them? Not sure of the ratios either. So I'll leave that on the screen for you, Rich.
Perfect. So yeah, you were spot on in regards to the potassium and magnesium. Potassium or citrate in general is fantastic to bind into oxalate, to help with oxalate dumping. No, look, the body requires potassium and magnesium. Potassium is required in much higher quantities than sodium is. And if we look as nature intended, potassium is roughly 4 times higher in beef and lamb than it is in sodium. So we need lots of potassium. We need sodium potassium for the potassium pump. We need sodium potassium to create energy. It's all part of the electron transport chain. And it's the same with calcium and magnesium, but calcium can be obtained comfortably from the diet. Magnesium, not so much, but it's only going to help alleviate lots of issues. Magnesium is essential for energy production and many other issues, hormone production, and so on and so forth. I consume lots of electrolytes. I take probably 10 scoops of those a day. I'm not telling you to do that. I add electrolytes to taste. I add electrolytes to the water when I feel that I need them, in the same way that I do with my salt. If I salt my meals, some days I put lots of salt on my meals. Other days I don't feel the requirement for the salt, so I don't do so. And this is what I do with the electrolytes. We are far more likely to be devoid of these essential minerals than we are to be over toxic with them. The body is incredibly intuitive. Somebody said to me recently that the amount of sodium that you're telling people to consume is toxic and it's going to kill people. You try eating or consuming sodium, you'll be sick well before any danger it occurs from the sodium or potassium consumption. The body's incredibly intuitive. It tells you when you need these things. You start to crave them, and quite often when someone is new to the ketogenic or carnivore lifestyle, those sugar cravings that you are getting, it's quite often a salt craving and not a sugar craving, and can be addressed by taking salts, whether that be the Celtic sea salt, pink Himalayan, or an electrolyte formula. But far more benefits. We're far more likely to be devoid of these nutrients. And citrate carries a very high bioavailability, so it's very active in the body. Other compounds like oxides are not very active. Citrate is an incredibly active form of magnesium and potassium, and as you rightly say, is incredible for oxalate dumping, as well as all the other processes. You're still muted, Steve.
Sorry about that. I like to mute so you're heard in beautiful stereo. Rin has asked, on keto and carnivore diet, one should take electrolytes forever? ? I would say no, but what would Rich say?
Look, there's many people within the ketogenic and carnivore community who do not need to consume electrolytes. Anthony Chaffee being one of them. Anthony does not consume any electrolyte formula. And then you have, on the flip side, Sean Baker, who is known for taking electrolytes because he trains intensively. He's a world record holder in rowing. He trains extensively in the gym, and his requirement for electrolytes is going to be higher. Anthony no longer competes professionally, doesn't train as often as he used to, so his requirement is a lot lower. Now, what I would say is that salt, sodium, potassium, electrolytes, if you like, are essential in the initial phase. And the reason for this is that many of us are coming from a state of insulin resistance. So insulin is elevated within the body. It's this insulin resistance that leads to essential hypertension or high blood pressure. So if you are a sufferer of high blood pressure, it's not a sodium problem, it's an insulin problem. You are insulin resistant. And what happens is when insulin is elevated, insulin will pull the sodium from the 4 points in the nephrons in the kidneys. Stephen loves that line. It's one I constantly repeat. It'll pull the sodium back into the blood. Wherever sodium goes, water follows. And then comes the high blood pressure. So it's not a sodium problem initially. It's the insulin. So when you begin to restrict the seed oils, because seed oils cause more insulin resistance than carbohydrate do as a percentage, and the carbohydrate, insulin drops, and it begins to drop almost overnight. And we start to see this steady decline to the degree that we can reverse someone who is insulin resistant, i.e. a type 2 diabetic, in as little as 2 weeks with the reduction of carbohydrate and vegetable oils. Now insulin drops. It's no longer pulling in the sodium from those 4 points in the nephrons in the kidneys. It's losing the sodium. Now we need this sodium from an exogenous source, because we're now suffering with what's called keto flu. We feel fatigued, we feel nauseous, we feel sick and lightheaded. We're no longer able to create energy because we no longer have the sodium or the potassium in the body. So supplementing in the early stages, I believe, is incredibly important, particularly from sodium. And this is what many do. We salt our meals, lots of sodium, fantastic. Now, there is an issue, there is a caveat to this, because excessive sodium consumption depletes potassium. So now we're in a potassium deficit. So we need now to increase the potassium to counteract this excessive amount of sodium. And that's why the supplementation can come in handy. So when you do that, you gravitate, your body adapts. Now you're eating maybe more organ meats, you're eating the stringy parts on your beef, your steak, the connective tissue. Maybe the requirement for electrolytes goes away and you no longer need them. And that's fantastic. If you can get to that stage, that is absolutely brilliant. I've taken them out many times. I find I thrive when I supplement with electrolytes for various reasons. So for me, I will continue to take them. I've been living this way for 10, 11 years, and I find that I thrive on an entirely different level if I'm constantly taking an electrolyte formula. But it doesn't mean that you cannot. You may adapt, and the ability to thrive without them may present itself. So we're all individual. As I say, Anthony Chaffee does not take exogenous electrolytes, and Dr. Sean Baker does. So yes, it is possible. And if you can get to that point, then even better. Stephen, back in the room.
That's brilliant. Herbert just quickly asked what type of zinc. Is there a form of zinc that you need to take, or is it just any zinc?
Yeah, any zinc is going to help. Zinc is found incredibly high quantities in meat, but obviously, there is a problem there because you're consuming the meat and you're obviously needing more zinc. Yeah, any zinc for now, I think is gonna help. Unless you have a preference, you may know of any type of zinc, possibly Steve, that may confer more of a benefit. But look, it's again.
Do you have zinc in your armory?
I do
You
not.
sell it? All right.
I do
Well,
not.
British supplements have a good version of zinc. So, right, we have to go to the next platform, which rhymes with apple crumble, and I've put the link in the chat. Now, Rich has started a Rumble channel. I'll tell you how busy we are. We haven't had a chance to talk about how to hook that channel up to the live. So I'm going to say this live to Richard because we haven't been able to talk about it at all. If we go into my studio, I'm wondering if once I'm in there, we can then hook up we can then add it as like we do with X and Facebook or whatever. I don't really know, Rich. So it's something we should have done in the week, but we're just too busy at the moment. So if we go into my studio, and then when we're in there, we'll try and see if I've got buttons to be able to get it to yours. Is that okay?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't stress today, Steve. I think let's keep the continuity. We'll just jump on the show. I think you and I can jump on a call, tomorrow or whenever, and we'll get it sewn up. I've managed without a Rumble account until now. I'm sure another couple of days isn't going to hurt. Steve, can you send me the Rumble link though? I don't think you've sent it through yet. But
right, okay, the studio link. I shall do that onto your WhatsApp. All right, okay. Thanks everybody on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you all.
We're going to end that stream now.